All right, welcome to a special NFL draft episode of Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard. This guest, fans have been clamoring for the return of Emory Hunt Jr. So we brought him back. You guys know him, CBS Sports, Football Gameplan, the czar of the playbook, as he is known. He has the Football Gameplan draft guide out now, footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide. Over 900 players, if I'm correct, Emory. And what we love about you here on this podcast, and what I know the fans love about you, is you do your own thing. You do all these evaluations with your own eyes and ears, going to all these showcases. And we're just really grateful to have you back on the show, man.
Well, I'm always glad to be on the show, Pat. We talk a lot of ball amongst ourselves, you and I, and we see each other at camp all the time. And so, it's funny to kind of see how things go early in the process to see how they play out. So that's why I'm glad to be back on the pod.
Yeah, no, it was a cool process last year. You doing the pod and us going through like the whole different draft class, sleepers, UDFA studs, that kind of thing. And then going to training camp, standing there on the sidelines and looking at some guys right there in front of us who we'd been talking about, what their fits would look like and so forth. Really fascinating stuff. Looking forward to diving in with you right here. First, need to tell the listeners about Bet Online. BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And where I want to start, Emory, is, as I said, you do your own thing. And so your rankings are always pleasantly surprising in terms of not going with the crowd, and you're making your own evals. And one that jumped out to me right off the bat when we're talking about the Giants and we're talking about quarterbacks is Spencer Rattler. You have Spencer Rattler of South Carolina ranked third overall in this quarterback draft class in your draft guide. Also was reported recently by Mike Garafolo of NFL that Spencer visited the Giants recently. So want to start off with him. Why are you so high on Spencer Rattler as a prospect, and why do you have him ranked so high again over some of the other names that have definitely become more popular among the consensus and mainstream?
Well, as you know, Pat, I'm always big on the situational football and the ancillary things about the quarterback position because that matters before we get into arm strength, accuracy, mobility, all that stuff like that. And I like that Spencer Rattler has been battle tested because if you go back to his freshman year when he jumped onto the scene at Oklahoma, all you heard was people saying, "Oh man, you should tank your draft and just take Spencer Rattler number 1 overall because he's gonna be a monster. You got to take him number 1 overall. He's good to go." Then his next season, the statistical numbers weren't bad. The play on the field wasn't good. And so he gets usurped in a very competitive, tightly contested rivalry game, the Red River rivalry, by Caleb Williams, who goes on, brings it back in that ball game, stunning fashion, takes the job over from Spencer Rattler, goes on to win the Heisman Trophy and a presumptive number 1 overall pick. So no downside in losing your job to the number 1 overall pick. Right. And then he transfers out, goes to South Carolina, and doesn't play well to start the season there in 2022. And so you're like, man, I don't know what people saw in Spencer Rattler. And then the last 6 games of 2022, he had the upset against Tennessee, the upset against Clemson, played really, really good in a bowl game against Notre Dame. And you like, wow, this dude, okay, he's turning around and starting to click for him again. I thought he would have came out last year when his name was hot because that's what you kind of want those guys to do. Don't go back and get more tape because all they're going to do is pick at your game. But he wanted to go back and play another year under a very good NFL coach at South Carolina and wanted to continue to and build on what he did the late last parts of 2022. And it didn't start off good because at the end of the day, the offensive line was still in flux, but he was able to fight through that. He outplayed Drake May in that opener. They just couldn't block anybody up front. And so he started to get better as the offensive line got better. And he still had the success that we saw him build on the last couple of games of 2022. So I was like, wow, I love the fact that he was highly praised out the gate, got hit in the mouth, got back in the lab, changed programs, and got better and better. And now that coupled with the fact that he went down to Mobile, Senior Bowl MVP, had a really good week there.
Yeah.
This is someone that has played a pro career already in terms of the highs and lows. So you look at him and his makeup, and you're like, I like that kid. I like that he's been battle tested. I'm willing to put my money on him to be successful as a pro.
I love it. Battle tested, a great description of what Spencer Rattler is and could be for an NFL team. One quick follow up on Rattler. What team do you view as maybe the best fit for a quarterback like Spencer Rattler, given his skill set being battle tested? I know just some teams that have been connected to him throughout this process: Broncos, Raiders, Seahawks, Falcons, maybe throw the Steelers in there. Developmental wise, obviously, though, they've added 2 quarterbacks, but now we even see him visiting the Giants if they don't take a guy at number 6. Any of those teams jump out to you, or anyone else you have marked?
Giants, Raiders, and low key the Rams. Stafford can't play forever.
Ooh.
You know, he's up there. And he's at the point now in his career where he's talking about retirement, right? Rattler to me reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield and the Bucks Baker Mayfield, which is completely different from the Browns Baker Mayfield, which is more along the lines of what we saw with the Rams Baker Mayfield. And I feel like someone like Rattler, same size, same athleticism, same skill set, same arm strength, kind of fits that mold of Sean McVay. I would throw the Rams in there as a sneaky place too, but I love the fit for the Giants, for the Raiders, and for the Rams.
Wow. Yeah. I also love you throwing out just in general the idea that the Rams are in the quarterback market right now. And also, Les Snead owns a first-round pick, I believe, for the first time in like a century. So will be very interesting to watch the Rams operate. I know a lot of people around the league are just interested to see the Rams being there and how it's going to impact everything, because they're just never in the first. While we're on the quarterback position, let's just get right to it in regard to the Giants. Which quarterback, when you've watched all these guys, and maybe for people who don't know, like Emory goes to all of these preseason scouting games, every single one. Like he's at all of them. He's seeing these players with his eyes and ears, in addition to all of his contacts and scouting. He's doing it. He's calling, college games himself. So he's there in person. So he's seeing it all. You don't get perspective like Emory has. So which quarterback do you see in this draft that is maybe the best fit for the Giants when you call playing style, draft position that might make sense to take him, positional value and needs for the Giants? Does anybody jump out to you? Because obviously May, McCarthy, Penix, a lot of these guys, Bo Nix came in for a visit. We just talked about Spencer Rattler. A lot of them have been connected to New York. Does somebody jump out to you as pegged for this guy belongs in Big Blue?
Yeah, unfortunately, they played themselves out of the top 2 guys, during the season. That would have been perfect fits for them. But to answer your question, you look at, we talked about Rattler. I kind of like maybe if they, obviously, I don't think they go quarterback at 6 because that would be reaching for a guy. But if you're looking at day 2, maybe even day 3, Michael Pratt out of Tulane, is someone I think has the makeup, athlete, very good arm talent, and still has upside left in his game. I compared his intangibles to that of Dak Prescott when he was at Mississippi State. Like, and I said this last week on the show. I grew up in New Orleans, born and raised. I played high school ball 2 blocks from Tulane. I never would have thought of the words Tulane beats USC Cotton Bowl would have ever come out my mouth at all. And he was a quarterback. And the reason why I brought up Dak Prescott was the fact that Dak Prescott had Mississippi State #1 in the country when he was like, that's insane. You never would have thought Mississippi State would have been #1 in the country in football, no less. So, that's type of intangibles you have with the Michael Pratt. And you could get him on day 2. And the other guy that is Jordan Travis of Florida State. Had Jordan, who's my #4 quarterback, but had Jordan Travis, people just feel like he got his leg amputated. Like, man, he just broke his leg. He's fine. He's going to be all right. And he's already back and throwing and things of that nature. So now because of that, his stock will drop. So you can get him maybe early day 3. And that's tremendous value for the Giants, a guy that has won a lot of games, seen a lot, done a lot, kind of got through the fire like Spencer Rattler. When I spoke with him at the combine, he said, man, I couldn't hit nothing as a freshman, early in my career at Florida State. And you saw him get better. It was early in his career. You're like, man, I don't know if this is going to end up playing quarterback. Like he might end up being another position. And then he got better to where you're now telling yourself, damn, they needed him at quarterback because he's the dude. And so, and we know this, had he stayed healthy that this past season, they would have gone to the postseason. Maybe he would gotten that postseason bump like CJ Stroud did, got people to realize how good he was. He would have played in the postseason All-Star game, the Shrine Bowl, and he would have been able to participate in all of the things at the combine. And we will be talking about him probably as a guy getting into the first round, And so I think that's the one that we need to keep an eye on, because he's injured. He was injured, but his skill set is still impressive.
Yeah. Sounds like when we do later, I know last year we did a segment that was very popular. We'll do it later in this podcast, the Stud Sleeper UDFA, where you give us one player, let's say at each position, to look at the top of the draft, a sleeper, and then maybe an undrafted free agent. Sounds like this guy, Travis, falls into the big time sleeper category for you. Interesting too, that his name really hasn't been bandied about much. I guess, like you said, it's the injury, but definitely in a draft that is deep at quarterback and not just talented. I'm glad you're giving us those two names, Pratt and Travis, to look for the Giants. All right, so shifting to wide receiver, and as you said, you don't think that they should go quarterback or will go quarterback at 6. You believe that would be a reach. If they go wide receiver, which is the most likely alternative, I need you to educate me on two guys in particular. So Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Malik Nabers. And the reason why is we have Marvin Harrison Jr. has been super quiet during this pre-draft process, right? And you actually have Keon Coleman from Florida State ranked ahead of him, which is also interesting. And then meanwhile, you have Nabers. His stock seemingly has risen throughout this process, but this guy didn't even weigh in at the combine, which is very unusual. Been some rumors about off-field issues, et cetera, but some people view him as the number one. How do you stack them up? And can you just dive in a little bit for me into who is Marvin Harrison Jr., who is Malik Nabers, and what are they as prospects if the Giants are sitting there at 6 and, let's say, hypothetically looking at both of them?
They are all future Pro Bowl players right off the bat, period. That's one statement. So people can't misconstrue anything I'm saying. Like, they are all Pro Bowl type talents and players. Nabers is more explosive than Harrison.
Okay.
Period. That's another statement. That's clearly obvious because he could take a short pass a long way. He's kind of on that Jamar Chase spectrum where he doesn't really have to get deep down the field to be an impact. He just needs the ball and he does the rest, right? So you can play him anywhere across the receiver position, right? Any one of the three, split, slot, or Z. And Harrison has great hands. So does Nabers. So they both have great hands. Harrison has great hands and a bigger body, shown a savviness in terms of breaking off his route, working himself back to the quarterback, finding ways to get open, shows some savvy in terms of being able to run after the catch. I think that's maybe an underrated part of his game, which is why you saw Ohio State. A lot of his big plays came when he was off the ball and they created, plays for him, in terms of like, hey, we're going to create this opportunity for him to slip underneath and get him the football and let him run after the catch. He's not as explosive as Nabers. And I feel like Nabers is a little bit more apt to get off bump press consistently than Harrison, which is something that he could work on. Now, him being quiet during the cycle, I don't have a problem with it because I understand his position. Firstly, and I'm glad my colleague over at CBS, Ryan Wilson, brought this up. It's like, because Ryan Wilson was at the pro day last year for CJ Stroud. Harrison was there working out, like one of the receivers working out. So Harrison, like, man, I did this already. Like, why would I have to do it again? You guys saw me last year workout, go through a whole pro day workout, albeit for CJ Stroud. And secondly, if I've been talked about as a number one guy since last year, why would I do anything to give y'all a chance to pick apart and pay me less? If you said I was the number one guy, I'm going to force you to prove it. If not, the further I drop, the better situation I go to. So, I mean, ball's in your court, So I think and he's given himself some rest because we know this and we hear about this, the rookie wall, because they constantly travel throughout the postseason of a college football season. First of all, these dudes are playing 15 games, which is stupid. And then after they're done, you got All-Star game, combine, pro days, 30 visits, all of these things. It's like, bro, listen, by the time they get to the football season, like, man, he ain't get out the blocks great. Yeah, because he's been doing all kind of other stuff for months. And so
Mm.
giving your body a rest, which is what he's doing, it shows you that one, the benefit of having a pro dad that has gone through this process to understand what it takes to survive and sustain as an NFL wide receiver. And I guarantee we won't hear about a rookie wall for Marvin Harrison Jr.
Aha. So you don't think in the end, you don't really think, not to put words in your mouth, but you don't think that the scouting community would really hold against him that he didn't go through this process because there's already so much that he's done. There's nothing left to prove, basically. Or is that just your opinion? But it could vary, kind of throughout the league.
Yeah, it's just my opinion. That's
Yeah,
just my
gotcha.
opinion. Because we've seen people knock guys for the worst things. So
Yeah, right. Rome Odunze from Washington, conversely, you have him. So you have the receivers in your draft guide, split up into their specific positions. And so as far as split ends or X receivers, you have Odunze from Washington as number one. I'm just wondering, when you look at it schematically on what the Giants need on their offense, do you think Odunze and an X receiver and that split end is a better fit for what they need to complete their offense and add more weapons? Or is getting that flanker like a Harrison or Nabers have to be more of a priority to try to unlock either Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or a rookie quarterback they take?
either the X or the Z can be your number one. So for the Giants, they need a number one. I believe Odunze could be a number one. Harrison could be a number one. Nabers can be a number one. A.D. Mitchell could be a number one. I feel like all of those guys can be number ones. Burton can be a number one, kind of like Odell Beckham Jr. And the Giants currently have a bunch of 2s and 3s. So no one that's going to kind of dictate coverage. Like kind of, hey, we got to come in and stop this guy. And I think that's where they have to go. And that, that's we're talking about semantics here, splitting hairs when we're thinking of in terms of ZX is really outside inside. But that's why slot is really its own thing. But when you look at Odunze, Harrison, Nabers, any one of those three is what the Giants need.
What about Thomas from LSU, real quick? Guy who I think he led the FBS in touchdown catches. Is he number one material, or is he just a rung below those guys?
No, he's number one material. He's like T. Higgins. What's fascinating about him is, as a taller receiver at 6'3", 205 pounds or whatnot, he has great run after the catch skills. Like, he is another one that doesn't have to really rely on a deep ball or playing above the rim. He can do those things, but man, you get him a quick slant, he's able to navigate through and make his way down the field to the end zone. So he's another one of these guys, which is why you're hearing a lot of talk of, man, this is a great receiver class. And I don't think it's quite 1996. We won't know that until the end. But in terms of talent, it is definitely right there, if not a little bit better than 2014.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, I mean, listen, if you can get a great player at 6, you take a great player at 6 more often than not. But there definitely seems, especially looking at your rankings and how you're telling me so many different receivers in this draft you think could be number one material, it does feel like a draft where a team that, if they could acquire a haul to move back, not too far, but if you could acquire a haul to move back, if you're the Giants, let's say you weren't taking a quarterback at 6 and you were willing to be the Vikings trade partner or the Broncos trade partner and move back to 11, 12, you can still get, in your opinion, a number one receiver back there and be getting a lot more assets to add to your team. But obviously that can be overthinking it. And like, if Malik Nabers, the most explosive receiver and possibly player in this draft, is there at 6, you're just taking him. But it does make my wheels spin as I listened to Joe Shane in his recent pre-draft press conference, and he was kind of lobbying for more calls from behind the Giants pick. So that's something that I'm thinking about right now as we talk. So league-wide, you're always great with identifying players that aren't on everybody's radar, but absolutely should be. And so I'm wondering, is there a player league-wide that you think is going to be drafted top 15 or 20, or should, that nobody is talking about? So in other words, like maybe your top sleeper up here in the first round area for the draft?
Kool-Aid McKinstry. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people in the draft community say they watch tape and they marry themselves to the tape until the combine and the all-star game happens. Then all that's out the window. Then they just focus on that, right? So I feel like because he didn't work out or run at the combine, people forgot Kool-Aid McKinstry was a great player. You know what I'm saying? And so now that he's fully healthy, and yes, Kool-Aid McKinstry, people talk about Terrion Arnold, who's a fantastic corner. The reason why we're talking about Terrion Arnold because teams avoided going toward Kool-Aid McKinstry's side and realized, damn, we can't go to Terrion Arnold's side either. You know, he's just as good too. But Kool-Aid McKinstry is someone that's going to go in the first round that people are underestimating his skill set. He is a lockdown defender, great instincts, football IQ, and ball skills, has the length necessary, and does a great job playing press, playing man. He can drop off and play zone, plays the ball well in the air. So I feel like wherever he goes in the first round, it won't be high enough with how good he is.
Can he tackle like run defender?
You can't outside? If you're playing corner at Alabama, you better be able to tackle.
That's fair.
Like, you're not starting at corner if you're not able to tackle. So
that's fair. That was a dumb question. That's good. Nick Saban wasn't playing a corner on the outside who couldn't tackle a run support. That's and he had does he have some medicals, but people are feeling comfortable about him, I think maybe.
He found out at the combine he had a broken bone in his foot, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so they advised him not to run a workout. And so he just played the whole season. So, you know, I don't think it's anything to be worried about. So that's why he still talked about as going in the first round. But wherever it is, it's too low.
I wasn't planning on asking about this guy, but you jogged my memory while we're talking because you have now mentioned two different players who essentially were top players in the country when they were playing last season in Travis and McKinstry, but essentially because of injury issues or questions, they're not being placed right now in the, outside consensus circles as like obvious top half first or top first rounders. But Latu, the defensive lineman from UCLA, he's a guy who one person said to me, yeah, there's some people have some injury questions, but this guy's an absolute monster. And they think that he's going to go very, very high, even despite some of the questions. I'm just wondering, is he like a top half of first round talent and could go there as well, in your opinion? Or what is your scouting report on this player?
To the Emory Hunt GM, yes, he's going. It's funny because back in October, at the time, the Bears had the 1st and 4th pick. And under the assumption, I was like, listen, I'm keeping Justin Fields. And either I'm going to trade the number 1 pick down to maybe number 3 for King's ransom, but I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Nabers at number 1. Or I might take both guys because I can have the 1st and 4th pick. I might just double up on wide receiver.
Yeah.
Or I'll take the receiver first and then Latu 4th because he was and still is my number 1 pass rusher. He's my number 1 4-3 defensive end because I think he plays the run better than people think. Edge rusher number 1 is Jonah Ellis of Utah. Number 2 would be Dallas Turner. Number 2, 4-3 defensive end would be Jared Verse, right? So I think all of these guys are really good, elite pass rushers. But Latu, to me, has that dog about him where there was one play against USC where he's getting blocked, he got knocked on the ground, and he's dog crawling to try to hurry up, get back up because he's watching the ball the whole time and getting back there on the tackle. So he's fighting through blocks, fighting through getting knocked down, and still in on the play. That type of aggressiveness you want. And a lot of the talk about Latu leading up to the draft sounds a lot like Jalen Phillips leading up to his draft. People had questions about this.
You're right.
He retired, and people does he love the game? And he's one of the top pass rushers in the NFL, right? So I have no problems with Latu and his want to, because once football gets taken away, you realize what you've had, and now you're gonna bust your butt to not lose it again. You're gonna embrace and then just enjoy the whole every practice, every rep, every tired moment, and I think that's gonna be Latu. So I love the fact that he's going in with that level of perspective into the pro game.
That sounds like a player I want on my team. And you're right. Like, as listen, you have a seasoned scouting eye, but like one thing I feel like being around sports that you can tell about guys, like you can't coach something like that. Like
Right.
the example that you gave about him kind of crawling back into the play and hustling back, in a game that you can almost tell watching that, like if no one was watching this game, he would still do it. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
like when you see guys turn in that type of play and effort in, that vaults them up my board for sure. Okay. This was a fun game we did last year. We'll do it again this year. I picked 5 positions. Not that the Giants don't have more needs, but I picked 5 positions that they have to address in this draft that they have a need at. And we will do 1 stud, 1 sleeper, and 1 undrafted free agent type prospect in this class for each one. So we'll start with quarterback. Emory, we'll start with your stud quarterback for the Giants. If they take someone at the top of the draft and he's a stud, who do you like for them?
Spencer Rattler. Obviously,
Okay.
I cannot say Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, or that's
No,
too.
you
You
no, you
can't, right?
can't. I think they're off the board at this
Right.
point. I think you were right at the beginning. Yep.
So
Yep.
Spencer Rattler would be the stud.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we broke down Spencer Rattler. We broke down his game. Sleeper. Who would be the mid-round sleeper quarterback for the
We talked
Giants?
about him too. It would be Michael Pratt from Tulane.
Okay, Michael Pratt from Tulane. And then what about an undrafted free agent? Travis isn't going back that far, right? We're not talking back
Right.
about Travis as an UDFA. So who would be like an off the board? Maybe you're getting an extra 7th round pick to steal him before he comes a UDFA, like a developmental guy.
DJ Irons of Akron. First of all, he was well coached by Joe Moorhead at Akron. Big fan of Joe Moorhead and what he does with quarterbacks. 2, watching him against, it's funny because I was grading the running back of Akron, and I'm watching the quarterback, and they were playing, I believe, Tennessee or Ohio State or Indiana, one of those big schools. But this is the point. I'm like, man, this quarterback's actually pretty doggone good. Like, he's making far hash throws with touch and velocity. Like, and he can run too. Like, why isn't anyone talking about DJ Irons? And had he not gotten injured a little bit toward the back end of the season, that's why he didn't play in the Hula Bowl or Tropical Bowl. So he missed the All-Star game circuit completely. He would have played. He's 6'5", 6'6", about 205 pounds, a long strider, but a good athlete, can make every throw on the field. And he is someone that if I said this before, like during the season, if I was a UFL team, I'm talking to him right now to get him in for the spring to play, because that's the type of guy you want. And I feel like as an undrafted free agent, I will go after DJ Iron. Size, speed, athleticism, and upside.
Love it. All right, corner. Giants do need another corner. Maybe they add a veteran to go opposite Deontay Banks, but to me, even if they're doing that, you still got to add a corner here, help the secondary. Stud corner for the Giants.
Stud corner, Max Melton, Rutgers.
Okay. And he's a guy who showed up at their local pro day as well. So someone they've done some homework on. And does he give you everything you need as far as toughness on the outside, man-to-man coverage ability, everything that they would need in Shane Bowen's defense?
Oh, absolutely. And again, you cannot go wrong with a Greg Schiano coach cornerback.
That's right. That's right. Well said. Got to remember the context. All right. Sleeper corner for the Giants.
Sleeper corner, DJ James. Oh, you know what? He may go higher. I like DJ James of Auburn.
Okay.
But sleeper, I kind of feel like no one's talking about Mikey Victor, the corner of Alabama State.
Okay.
Physical presence, can tackle. Some may see him as a safety, so he gives you a little bit of that combo, that projection. Okay, we can move him kind of in the slot a little bit, and still he's 6'2", 212, so he can play. He's a big physical presence. He can play on the outside on the boundary, but also gives you some good strength versus the run because he's a very willing and good open field tackler. I think he's a sleeper. Had a really good Hula Bowl and a really good East-West Shrine Bowl as well.
What makes you, because you went right to the Auburn kid first. What do you love about DJ?
He's technique, he's athleticism, great break on the ball, good ball skills, and the tremendous speed. Like, he has good all-around game, like clean game. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him get called early in the second round, maybe even backdoor his way into the first. If the back end of the first really gets kind of crazy.
Right.
He was fantastic on film.
Interesting. And then a UDFA, a developmental, either late round or undrafted free agent corner that the Giants might take a flyer on.
Judging by, again, it's hard when you don't have Wink there because you already knew what type they were looking at. But I'm just
Right.
go with the guy that I like. All Emory Hunt team, Jae'Veyon Morton out of Morgan State. 5'8", about 180, right?
Okay.
But here's slot corner. But every game I was on in broadcast, if it was almost a great sense of timing when Morgan State needed a play, he made it, whether it was blitzing off the short corner, turning the ball over. And he is someone that has elite level football awareness in terms of instincts, ball skills. So if you are late throwing it outside, that ball is going back the other way because he's going to jump that route, kind of like Asante Samuel, and that ball is going back. He's making a house call. He was consistent every week, every game I call for Morgan State, and he's a 3-time All Emory Hunt team. Which is the running gag for the Morgan State broadcast because I never get past like 5 players. Like I always forget to build out a whole team. But every time I was like, oh yeah, he's on the Emory Hunt team. And so it's like it was always Jae'Veyon Morton. Like he's just a fantastic football player. Former Iowa State transferred to Morgan State, but performed well each and every year with the Bears.
Okay. Yeah. And, even the Giants have Cordell Flott in the program. They brought Darnay Holmes back, but they still have to keep throwing bodies at these corner positions. Like, I love Deonte Banks, what he is and what he can become on that one side. But even with guys in the building, even Nick McLeod, hopefully getting some more snaps on outside corner, I think they need to keep throwing bodies both at the slot and outside. So slot or outside, I love the fact that you're giving us some options here and names that I don't think people have been hearing as much about as they should be. All right, defensive tackle. This is one, Emory, that a lot of fans seem to be warming up to the idea of, like, let's say if the Giants take a defensive tackle in the second round at 47, right? Or use their third round pick at 70 on one. They see that Leonard Williams being traded out created a void. And also the Giants are now 2 years running where even with Wink's defense essentially carrying the team at times, they still were never really stopping the run consistently. And they get rid of Leonard Williams to acquire that extra pick. They flip one for Brian Burns. But now outside of Dexter Lawrence, it's Nacho Nunez Roches in the middle and some younger mental guys like Jordan Riley. Easy for me to say. But do you add a premier defensive tackle to that interior defensive line? That's a question I think a lot of Giants fans are warming up to. So I ask you, if they were to take a stud D tackle, and I'm not necessarily saying first round, could be using their second round pick on him, but if they were to take a stud D tackle to play it alongside Dexter Lawrence, who do you think it would be?
And I'm glad you prefaced that because 5 technique is technically a D tackle / DN, which is what Leonard Williams was.
Okay, right.
Brandon Dorlus of Oregon.
Oh,
fantastic player. When you watch the Oregon defense, he is consistently winning one-on-one battles, applying pressure. He has a weird build. He's built like a catcher. He's kind of like, squatty, like short torso, long legs, but kind of squatty.
Like an offensive guard?
Not even like a guard. Even guards are a little well proportioned. Catchers kind of like have a weird body, built like a baseball player almost.
Interesting.
But fantastic movement skills, awareness. His hand usage is where it needs to be. I think he would be a legit stud. He's my number 1 5 technique, and not a lot of people are talking about Dorlus.
Interesting. The reason I reacted that way too is Trevor Sycamore from PFF. We did like a Giant 7-round mock a couple of weeks ago on the pod, and he matched Dorlus to the Giants as well. And that this is interesting to me. Kind of position flex, defensive end, plays on the interior, like you said, athletic, good hands. That's interesting. I'm going to keep an eye on him. All right, a sleeper defensive tackle that you would maybe peg for the Giants.
I would probably go, and again, I'm probably cheating here because he's my number 1 nose tackle, but McKinley Jackson of Texas A&M. It's stud. Maybe it's because he wears the number 3 and single-digit D linemen always look good, but he's a really good defensive player. Like anchors down rather well, strong hands, very hard to move off the spot, and is legit opening up opportunities for backers, which is why a lot of those backers had so much success. for Texas A&M.
All right. And then an undrafted free agent option or 7th round pick option at D tackle.
Let's go back to Morgan State, Noah Washington. I like that Washington can play from the 9 to the 0. He's 6'4", 275, legitimately can play any one of the techniques up front. Has a nice pass rush move, long arm stab, able to walk guys back into the pocket. Very heady defender, played really well for Morgan State. And I thought he is another one that went down to the HBCU Legacy Bowl and had probably one of the better weeks of any defensive lineman there.
All right. Love it. So he's on the all Emory Hunt team over there at Morgan State. Gotcha. All right. Yeah, love it. I love it. All right. Wide receiver, stud wide receiver for the Giants in this draft.
Malik Odunze Harrison.
Any one of the three you love for them. Got it. I love it. Yeah, we broke that down. Obviously, in Emory's opinion, clearly any one of those guys becomes the Giants' number one and fills a big time need for New York. All right. Sleeper wide receiver. I know, as you've talked about, as Joe Shane talked about recently, this is not only a talented receiver draft, it is a deep receiver draft. So who do you like maybe in the 2nd, 3rd, even 4th round, mid-round sleeper for the Giants?
I'm going to hit you with a slash here.
Okay.
Javon Baker of UCF, dog. He's an ex-receiver, legit dog. And Xavier Weaver of Colorado. No one is talking about him. And he is someone, he was Shedeur Sanders, who is my QB1 for 2025, by the way. Yeah, he was nice Shedeur Sanders' number one option in the passing game and consistently showed up. He is quick off the ball, can win one-on-one, can win versus press, isn't afraid of going up against contact over the middle of the field, can make the tough catch, ran rather well, good size, and people just aren't talking about him enough, man. We've become fixated on about 6 names at receiver, but those two dudes, Baker and Xavier, now they're talking about Xavier Worthy, who's a great one too, out of Texas. But Xavier Weaver, there's a lot of Xaviers in this class, by the way. Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina, Weaver and Worthy. So everyone, it's a big name back then in 2001, I guess. So Xavier Weaver out of Colorado is a name to watch.
All right, and a UDFA or undrafted free agent level receiver to take a flyer on that could maybe pop.
Last year, I was all over Colton Dowell at UT Martin, and people thought I was crazy because they had a great college gridiron showcase. And he ends up getting drafted by the Titans in the 7th round out of UT Martin. This year, going back to the college gridiron showcase, it's 2 guys. So I'll give you another slash. There's so many good receivers.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
John Giles, West Florida, 6'2", 202. Great leaping ability. Had a great college gridiron showcase. Got the call up to the Hula Bowl. Had a great week there. And also Kyle Sheets of Slippery Rock, who another fantastic receiver, 6'3", 222. Low 4.5, high 4.4 guy, stretch vertical type player, can play inside or outside. Great hands, great ability to go above the rim. Another one that had a really good week at the College Gridiron Showcase and was a fantastic player in the PSAC. You know what? I'll give you a couple more. You know, it's Cole Burgess, speedster, Cortland State. Everyone's been talking about him because of how he tested at the University of Buffalo Pro Day. He had the 1.43 10-yard split, which was an NFL record at the combine. That had he been gone, been allowed to be there.
Yeah.
Or D'Angelo Hardy, another Division III receiver out of North Central, at 6 feet, 195, savvy route runner. You go back and watch the Division III national championship game where North Central played Cortland, and you'll see both of those dudes elevating each other's game in that matchup. That was a fantastic Division III national championship game.
Dipping into D3. I love it. I think I would draft Kyle Sheets of Slippery Rock just to hear them announce Kyle Sheets of Slippery Rock. I just like how it sounds. Emory, follow up on that. Are any of the guys that you mentioned, or there's someone else that sticks out? Like Joe Shane mentioned in his recent press conference pre-draft that he liked the idea that there were a lot of receivers in this draft that were also returners, where you could get value in the depth parts of this draft where the guy is going to contribute on offense for you. He's not just a special teamer. He is a receiver, but he has return ability and he can contribute in this new kick return where there's going to be more opportunities for splash plays and returns. So any of the guys that you just mentioned fit that mold, or is there somebody else that maybe comes to mind when I say that?
Burgess is a really good kick returner, and Hardy. Both of those guys return kicks at their respective universities. So I think those are excellent options. Thinking back to other receivers I mentioned, I can't remember if not Worthy, Weaver was one. But I know offhand that both D'Angelo Hardy and Cole Burgess were.
Okay, okay. Something to keep an eye on there.
Keon Coleman returned punts at 6'3", 205 pounds, and people forget they knock him for his speed. You know who else was that tall returning punts and he questioned his speed, but had great route running skills like Coleman does?
Who's that?
That is, I guess I was about to say Charger, but now a Bear, Keenan Allen, same guy.
Ooh, Keenan Allen. There's a nice name to be compared to, and you have Keenan Coleman ranked like as your second Z receiver, right?
Yeah, people forget he's so good after the catch. He still has those arrogant hands that all the big time receivers have, where they could catch the ball above the rim. But because you're returning punts, you have that tells you off the bat quickness, footwork, ability to create separation. It has nothing to do with speed. If you return kickoffs, that's speed. Punts are totally different. That's shiftiness and quickness and elusiveness, and he has that.
Fascinating. All right, last position we'll do this for us. Offensive tackle. You were kind enough to help us out with pegging some tackles and guards for the Giants throughout the draft if they were to make selections throughout, because they do still have a need there. But to me, swing tackle looks like the biggest need right now entering the draft for the Giants, because they do have a Luminor signed and Andrew Thomas. Evan Neal's still in the building, but if Neal ends up being the backup, you're not counting on him to swing left or right, back up either of those guys. So if you're looking in this draft and you're looking for a tackle who ideally can also play the right, because you do have Andrew Thomas on the left, who would be your stud tackle for the Giants in this draft?
Probably would say Tyler Guyton of Oklahoma.
Okay.
Big mammoth tackle, 6'7", 322. Really good player. Just fantastic all the way around. Like I like to say he blocks out the sun. He is fantastic as a prospect. He would be someone, if Giants are looking at a tackle at the second round part, I would say he would be the stud.
Oh, interesting. He, if I remember correctly, I was looking at him the other day. He's one of those guys too who has just played a gazillion snaps, right? Like in the last 2 years, he's played something like 2,000 snaps or something ridiculous, but has that experience, battle tested, as you said about Spencer Rattler as well. Yeah, when you say blocks out the sun, I always think of, not to compare him to this player, but I always think of sitting there in Prime 47 at dinner one night at the combine, and suddenly the room gets dark out of nowhere. It's like someone turned the lights off, and I was like, "What happened? Did the electricity go out?" And it was Mekhi Becton walking past our table with his agents and people, and I thought, now that measures up to everything I've heard about that young man.
Large dude.
That was an unforgettable experience. All right, so Jalen Guyton, if they were to go second round tackle, interesting draft too, Emory, where, not to get into all the permutations of the first round, but there are a lot of tackles who are going to go in the first round. And for a Giants team that still would like to make sure their offensive line is good enough, it would be interesting. I know they have so many needs, but it just would be interesting for them to be in this draft and not get a tackle in the first, when you're going to see a run of like 5, 6, or 7 of them in 11 or 12 picks in the middle of the first. But I just think that's interesting. All right, sleeper offensive tackle for the Giants in the middle rounds.
And I did this on purpose so I could bring him up here, and that's Kieran Amagaji. Even though I have a higher grade on him over Guyton, Amagaji is from Yale. Fantastic athlete, man. And he has the quickness with his punch, so he's winning the hands first battle. His footwork is where it needs to be. He's a tackle only guy, because some people's thinking, oh, he played at Yale, you probably have to kick inside. Now he's a legit 6'5", 325 or something like that, and has the technique, the punch, the ability to really hold it down at a tackle spot.
And when you scout a player who's played at a lower level school, whether it's D3 or whether it's an Ivy League and they're not playing the SEC schools, how do you deal with those those scouting reports? Is it still in your mind just important to evaluate the player, regardless of who he's playing against? Or, are you able to, or do you try to project, well, how would this guy measure up if he faced, an edge rusher from Mississippi State or whatever it is?
You find that with the guy. That's why when you look at the FCS talent, you have a better chance of gauging the projection because they play a lot of crossover games, FBS games. And the one game I watched for Amagaji was the Morgan State game. Why? Because they have Elijah Williams, who we'll talk, who's going to be a draft pick next year for Morgan State up front. And we just talked about Noah Washington. So that was a good matchup for him, right? To see two different types of rushers and two different types of bodies. But if you're looking like lower Division II levels, you kind of find okay, who did they play someone at the FCS level? Or if you were able to see them at an all-star game, that's huge. So that's something that's always, the challenge. And if you're going D2, D3, NAIA, you better dominate the competition. Like I remember this was last year, or I think last year, or maybe 2 years ago. I was at the NFLPA Bowl and I'm watching the NAIA Andrew Rupchick, offensive lineman. So I'm like, wow, he's having a solid week at the NFLPA game. So you're NAIA and you're playing FBS Power 5. And so I go and grade his tape, after the All-Star game. And I'm like, in my notes, I was like, this might have been the best NAIA film I've ever seen. Like, in terms of dominated, like you expect someone 6'6", 6'7", 320 pounds at the NAIA level to dominate. Might have been the best example of that because he was legitimately throwing dudes out the way. That's what it's supposed to look like. And then you combine that with what you saw at the All-Star game and it meets in the middle. Like, okay, cool. He's still with the Tennessee Titans, by the way. But it's just okay, watching this, it's like, okay, this is what I expected it to look like. Somebody
interesting. Right. You're like, it better look like this. And I'm glad it does. Right. Right. No, that'll be interesting. I'll watch for him on the Titans now. That's interesting. And yeah, no, Emory, I said this to you, we were texting, but I need you or somebody to compile for you your receipts because you drop all these names and you talk about these things in the moment. And then 3 years later, people start trying to take credit for having seen something when they didn't even know who the guy was 3 years ago. And they're probably looking up your scouting report on him to even find out about him. And you're the guy putting him on the radar in the first place. So that's why I'm happy you're here educating us. But also I do feel like you need a receipts website, people can search by year, maybe, see how it goes. But no, that you bring up a good point though, too, which is, I guess it should be obvious to me. And when you're at these games, like when I go to the Senior Bowl, things like that, but that is a good perspective too, on why all of these games, you mentioned the Hula Bowl, you mentioned the NFLPA, you mentioned the Showcase, you mentioned the Senior Bowl, all those things. And then the Combine, but all of these showcases enabling people like yourself, scouts around the league, general managers, to see these players all at different levels, matching up best on best. Because if you don't have that tape available, you want to give them all an opportunity to kind of rise to the top throughout the process. Right. So that's really what that process is all about. So that's good context there. All right. So a UDFA, undrafted free agent or late round developmental guy that Giants O-line coach Carmen Brasillo, who, by the way, is the 8th O-line coach the Giants have had in the last 10 years, Emory.
No continuity.
I mean, every time I say it, I can't believe it. Who would be a player that would be great to get him in the building at tackle? Brasillo could get his hands on him, work with him, mold him into what the Giants need, maybe as a future swing tackle or backup, or even competing for a starting job.
Mike Jarrell out of Findlay, which is a Division II program in Ohio. They play great ball at within this conference, so he's it's a good Division II conference. But he is someone that really stood out at the Hula Bowl as well. Another one so now you have a D2 tackle going up against a dude from Indiana, right? So you get to see right away, can he hold his own? He was able to hold his own all throughout the week. So that's someone that I definitely would bring in because I'm glad you mentioned the key word swing tackle, because I think he would be a perfect one to groom, develop, and mold.
That's the sweet spot right now for what the Giants need. That's for sure. All right, last one. Let's round it out, and we'll put you on the spot. Well, you already said you think quarterback's a reach at 6, but I want to know if you're Joe Shane, you're Emory Hunt, the GM, you're sitting here holding number 6 overall and number 47 overall in the second round. They have 6 picks total, but just limiting it to these 2 top ones. How do you think the Giants should use these 2 picks based on their roster needs and based what you know from scouting all of these prospects in this draft?
That's a great question. 1 at 6 was easy. I am going, I told you, Malik, how I put it, Malik Harrison,
Odunze,
Odunze. I'm going one of them, whoever the Cardinals don't take, and whoever the Chargers are the wild card, because they can go anywhere, right?
They are the wild card.
They
Yep, I
it wouldn't
totally
surprise me
agree.
if Harbaugh take Bowers either. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that, like, they can go anywhere with the pick. So whoever those 2 teams don't take, I'm taking at 6. Bar none, I'm not moving. But at 47, now we get, okay, what do we think of Drew Lock? Is Drew Lock our new Geno Smith? Can we count on Drew? Can he show enough this year? I think he's going to win the job and be the starter. But if not,
Ooh.
then we need a plan for
Wait,
next
hold
year.
on. We're 51 minutes in, and you just dropped that you think Drew Lock's going to win this job outright. Is that what you just said?
If it's about competition and if it's an open competition, the best player is going to win. And Drew Lock is the best player. He's healthy.
Ooh.
He got the arm. He can push it downfield.
Emory bringing the heat. All right, so you think he could do that, but you're saying, are you leaning to quarterback here if there's not full confidence that would be the case?
Or full confidence that if this is just a stopgap and we're going to do what we did this past year and play ourselves out of the Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes, so I would say, okay, now we could pull a trigger on Spencer Rattler or Michael Pratt, or I would go corner if I'm not taking one of those 2 QBs, because I feel like I can get a Jordan Travis on day 3 if I go a different position at 47.
So you like maybe like a Rattler or a Max Melton here, maybe?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do like corner for them here. It's I understand some fans clamoring for the D tackle and let's stop the run. So especially you're facing Saquon Barkley and the Eagles twice a year now. But that other corner position, I mean, their secondary losing McKinney and really not nailing down that other corner spot, I think is scary, especially with a new defensive coordinator and a scheme that is not going to take immediately this shift. So I like that. I like corner there. I'm fascinated by how aggressive the Giants are scouting the QBs. And yet when I talk to people like yourself, who I respect your opinion and your insight into these prospects in the draft, there's so many people who feel like in the end, this aggressive quarterback hunt is not going to lead to a Giants quarterback pick in the first round. It really is one of the biggest fascinations of the draft, but we are really grateful that you've been here to break it all down with us, Emory. Guys, he is Emory Hunt Jr. He is CBS Sports. He's an expert with Football Gameplan as well. He runs that. It's footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide. More than 900 players scouted by Emory at all the bowl games and showcases that you heard Emory mention. He was there in person, calls games in person, knows these people, talks to these people, has really good insight throughout the draft. So especially not only on day 1 of the draft, but Emory, and I know when we get to day 2 and day 3 of the draft, a lot of people start getting real quiet. and that's when you shine the most, in my opinion, because you do the full breadth of it. And we're really grateful that you've been on. Remember, everybody, we are sponsored by Bet Online, also by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Essencia Day Cafe from El Salvador, dates back to 1798. Emory, I'm pumped for this draft, man. I feel like with the five, maybe 4 quarterbacks, 6 potential first rounders, plus this receiver and tackle class, I'm as excited for this draft as I have been for any in a long time. Do you feel like the talent of this draft validates my excitement, or am I just getting kind of quarterback fever right now?
Nah, you're dead on about the draft. It's anytime every draft has good talent across the board. Don't listen to the people out there that tell you otherwise.
I love it. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Everybody, you can find Emory on Twitter, Instagram, Football Game Plan, CBS Sports. Like I said, thanks for being here at Talkin Ball. Emory, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Pat. Always a pleasure.